Sheltered from the centuries, the cliff dwellings cling to sandstone ledges as if clinging to another time. And so it must have seemed to the young Swedish explorer in the summer of 1891. Gustav Nordenskjöld was a scholar driven by curiosity, by scientific inquiry. In a West that was still wild, Nordenskjöld came armed. But all of his shooting was with a vintage Kodak camera. He was fascinated by reports of recently discovered lost cities in the Southwest. But the small cities of stone were never really lost. For centuries they were known to wandering hunters who had encountered the tumbling stone walls. And neither were the cliff dwellings from a lost civilization. By the 1890s, Nordenskjöld and archaeologists had convincing evidence that the descendants of Mesa Verde lived on, in the pueblos along the Rio Grande and in the Hopi and Zuni villages to the south. The past homelands and migrations of Puebloan peoples were remembered in oral histories, traditions, and ceremonies. Mesa Verde was neither lost nor forgotten, just unknown to the new settlers. Mesa Verde rises abruptly from the Montezuma Valley of southwest Colorado. Faulted and pushed up by unseen geologic forces, the massive block of stone and earth slopes gently toward the southeast. Streams cut long valleys into the plateau, dissecting the caprock of Cliff House sandstone. During winter, the endless cycle of water freezing and thawing wedges apart fractures in the sandstone, helping to create alcoves and sheltering ledges. Mesa Verde is constantly changing. And yet the landscape of today is very similar to that encountered by the first inhabitants. They were hunters and gatherers who came to this high plateau following game between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago. These nomadic peoples left little more than scattered stone tools and charcoal from their campfires in the archaeological record. For archaeologists, mysteries surround this high green tableland, Mesa Verde in Spanish. Like drifting clouds that obscure our vision, researchers may never get a perfectly clear image of the earliest inhabitants. Not until about 450 AD does the picture of the past improve. And then they appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, the basket makers. Early explorers were impressed by their finely woven baskets, but these unknown people had left no evidence of pottery. The basket makers were hunters and gatherers, but they were also farmers, cultivating corn and squash. They lived in pit houses dug into the earth. Supported by beams, the pit house walls were made of jacal, woven branches covered with a mud plaster. The earliest pit houses clustered in small villages at the base of cliffs, on the mesa tops, and under protected alcoves such as here at Step House. As crops became more important to the basket makers, pit house villages were built and expanded on the mesa tops, closer to the fields. Between 450 and 750 AD, the basket makers learned to make pottery, and it changed their lives. As did another remarkable invention, the bow and arrow. Up to this time, meat consisted mostly of small game caught in rabbit snares and kills made with an atlatl or spear thrower. Beans became a cultivated crop and turkeys were domesticated, their feathers being woven into blankets. And then, around 750 A.D., came one of the greatest changes of all. They left the pit houses of their ancestors and began building mesa-top apartment houses of poles and mud plaster. Later, shaped and pecked stones would replace the crude wood and plaster walls. Their small apartment buildings grew in size. Today, they are known by the Spanish word for villages, pueblos. Despite great distances in the Southwest, many pueblos were linked by trade. With no horses or beasts of burden, all travel was by foot. Sandals were made of woven cordage or fibers from desert yucca plants. And sandals would carry valuable trade items to Mesa Verde from hundreds of miles away. Though remote and isolated, the Mesa Verde region was linked by trade. Copper bells smelted in Mexico made their way to the nearby Montezuma Valley. Cotton grown in Arizona was woven on upright looms into fine cloth. Locally, dog hair was made into sashes. Turquoise from New Mexico was fashioned into pendants and necklaces and inlaid into pottery. Shells from the Pacific Ocean, the Gulf of California, and even the Gulf of Mexico were traded to the Southwest. Ideas traveled, as well as trade items. In building construction, T-shaped doorways became common across much of the Puebloan heartland. Pottery was both imported and exported. Intricate geometric patterns became widespread design elements. Mesa Verde was only a small part of a great phenomena spreading across the Southwest, the ancestral Puebloan culture. In only a short while, the early Puebloan farmers had advanced to building cities, true cities. It began sometime after the year 900, not quite 100 miles to the southeast in the bleak desert surrounding Chaco Canyon. Huge apartment buildings of hundreds of rooms reached skyward up to 4 or 5 stories in height. After the year 1125, Chaco's importance waned. A severe drought may have forced the exodus, but whatever the reason, archaeologists believe the cultural center of the Puebloans drifted northwest to the well-watered highlands of the Montezuma Valley and Mesa Verde. By the year 1200, by any assessment, southwest Colorado was booming. With well over 30,000 inhabitants, more people lived here then than now. They spread across the land and clustered into several large cities in the Montezuma Valley, west of Mesa Verde. Some of the cities had populations rivaling all of the settlements of Mesa Verde combined. Like city lights of today, the glow of fires may have brightened the night sky, especially during ceremonial times. The influence of the ancestral Puebloans had spread across much of the high desert and as far west as present-day Las Vegas, Nevada. Back then, nothing made Mesa Verde special. It may have been no more than a rural outpost of a rapidly advancing people. But today, Mesa Verde is very special because of its cultural significance and its remarkable preservation. The small stone villages of Mesa Verde serve as our best window into the world of the ancestral Puebloans. Over 4,000 archaeological sites have been recorded at Mesa Verde National Park. The highest concentration of sites are found on 2 separate mesas, Wetherill Mesa and Chapin Mesa. Separated from each other by deep canyons, each mesa was home to its own communities. Chapin Mesa was one of the most important centers. At first, relatively few Puebloans lived in cliff dwellings. They lived on the mesa tops in pit house villages and small pueblos. By 1100 AD, they began construction of Farview House. Farview was possibly 2 or even 3 stories high. Today, evidence of 40 rooms remain on the ground floor level. The Puebloans never really abandoned their ancestral pit house homes. Instead, the pits were dug deeper into the ground and evolved into both functional and ceremonial rooms. In the Hopi language, they are known as kivas, meaning room underneath, social and religious centers. 5 kivas are found at Farview House. Kivas were apparently very important to Mesa Verdean society. The usual floor plan was round, oftentimes with a key-shaped niche. Entrance was by ladder from a smoke hole in the roof. Benches ringed the kiva, separated by stone columns supporting a cribbing of beams for the ceiling. Walls were plastered and often painted and embellished with designs. Kivas were well engineered. Fresh air was drawn to the underground room by a ventilator shaft. A deflector of stone or hachal spread the air evenly through the room. Holes in the floor secured upright looms, which were fastened to both the floor and the timbered ceiling. Like modern Pueblo societies, it may be that men were the weavers at Mesa Verde. Kivas are only the most visible part of this legacy. The complex ceremonies and rituals, the dances, the flute music, and sound of the foot drum. These things live on. And so, in a way, we can see into the past. Modern Pueblo peoples carry on the traditions of their ancestors. South of Farview is Cedar Tree Tower. Here and elsewhere at Mesa Verde, kivas seem to be linked with towers. A tunnel joins the 2 structures. Sun Temple is a large double-walled building and is very different from most construction at Mesa Verde. The finely shaped stonework was exceptional and took time to fashion. Yet, it is the cliff dwellings that capture our imagination. Cliff Palace. The city had slept in silence for 600 years. It was not until 1888 that ranchers chasing down stray cattle came upon Cliff Palace. It appeared almost as an apparition through a snowstorm. The first stones were mortared into place at Cliff Palace around the year 1200. In a construction frenzy that would last for about 75 years, people started leaving their mesa-top pueblos to relocate in the cliffs. Their crowning achievement was Cliff Palace, with 150 rooms. It was home to over 100 people. The construction techniques were innovative and included both square and round towers. Their exact purpose is unknown. Like other villages, the 22 kivas were an important part of Cliff Palace life. Accomplished builders, the Mesa Verdeans took advantage of every natural ledge and cleft. High overhead are a series of rooms built into a narrow ledge. Space was at a premium, with little room for the village to expand beyond its natural enclosure. Like modern rooms, the interiors were often plastered and painted white, sometimes with decorative bands or motifs. One of the best preserved of all cliff dwellings is Spruce Tree House. Nestled under a shallow ledge, much of Spruce Tree House was intact when first encountered by local ranchers. Pottery making and most of the daily chores were done outside. The open spaces were plazas and occasional marketplaces. Many small pueblos clung to the sheer rock walls in nearby Cliff Canyon and Fuchs Canyon. The Cliff House Sandstone Formation provided more than alcoves and ledges for housing. Water percolated through the sandstone and emerged as isolated springs below the cliffs. Food was grown on the mesa tops above and in terraces in the canyons. Hundreds of check dams spanned small drainages to capture and hold runoff for crops. But why build in the cliffs? During the depths of winter, the south-facing cliff dwellings offered protection from frigid winds and were warmed by the direct rays of the sun. In the summer, with the sun higher in the sky, overhanging ledges provided cooling shade. To the southwest, across the deep divides of Navajo and Long Canyon, Wetherill Mesa was the center of another great concentration of cliff dwellings. Overlooking Rock Canyon is the second largest of all cliff dwellings, Long House. It sprawls beneath the caprock of Wetherill Mesa. Today, lizards stand guard at Long House. A spring at the back of the alcove once provided water for about 100 to 150 villagers. For years, theories proposed that violence forced the Mesa Verdeans to seek shelter in the cliffs, yet seldom do we see any direct evidence of warfare. And the open, rambling architecture of Long House implies that this was not the reason that the Puebloans first moved to the cliffs. Even so, the threat of violence may have triggered some of the last construction at Mesa Verde. In the late 1200s, long after work had halted at most sites, construction continued at Chapin Mesa's Balcony House. Facing east, Balcony House received only glancing warmth from the winter sun and was inhospitably cold. There may have been another reason to live here. The sheer cliffs, isolation, and defensive nature suggest that these people may have been prepared for trouble. In Puebloan times, the only access to Balcony House was on hands and knees through a tunnel-like entranceway. Rising 86 feet, Square Tower House is the tallest structure at Mesa Verde. A prehistoric apartment community braced against a sheer cliff wall. Almost in defiance of the vertical cliff, the villagers gouged hand and toe-hold routes to the mesa top. But unseen from the mesa above is a high, isolated refuge known by some archaeologists as the Crow's Nest. Tree ring dating identifies it as one of the very last structures to be built. Like a castle keep, the Crow's Nest has a defensive appearance. What happened? A devastating drought may have been the catalyst. In the year 1276, the rains were marginal. The drought intensified and desiccated the land off and on for 23 years, pushing Puebloans to the edge of survival. With little or no water, there may have been no choice. Or maybe something drew them away. Perhaps the promise of a better life in well-watered lands elsewhere. Whatever the case, by the year 1300, practically all of Mesa Verde's population had moved on. The cliffs would no longer echo the sounds of a vibrant, rapidly advancing society. The small stone villages of Mesa Verde would sleep in silence for 6 centuries. Yet this high mesa was never really abandoned. To this day, Mesa Verde remains a sacred land to the 19 pueblos of New Mexico, to the Hopis of Arizona, and a special place to the Navajos, Utes, and other Indian peoples of the Southwest. Mesa Verde is much more than an archaeological site. It is hallowed ground. These cold stone walls were once warm homes to the ancestors of today's Puebloan peoples. These places deserve your care and respect. Mesa Verde is not only one of America's most important parks, preserving the prehistoric past, it is also a World Heritage Site, a world park. It is a place that transcends international boundaries as well as time. Here, it is possible to go beyond our imagination and come face to face with the unseen past. Half hidden in the cliffs is a vital link in the story of human striving and accomplishment, a legacy of stone and spirit.